Hello, this is your Phantom Safety Pin, and welcome to Let's Play Eldritch. This is a game that was released on Steam a little bit ago. It actually follows the stories of American author H.P. Lovecraft, who was a horror author who lived in the 1920s, and he's responsible for Cthulhu, if you've ever heard of that. So, this game is heavily based on his stories. H.P. Lovecraft was born in Providence, Rhode Island. He had a pretty privileged upbringing, actually. His parents, his mother and his father, both ended up in a mental institution, actually, and he suffered from night terrors from a very young age, so he drew a lot of inspiration from his nightmares for this game. For his stories, I mean. So, you're going to notice this thing right here. I have actually completed this game before. I'm not going to be picking this up. This is the hard mode for the game. Instead, I'm actually going to do some looking around the library, show off some stuff. That's a leaderboard, so don't need to worry about that. This is important. Elder Ridge Library. Borrow Ledger. Interesting. I have no idea who these people are, but very fascinating. I wonder if any of them is the Necronomicon. Looks like it hasn't been visited since the 1920s. So, looks like we've been here for a very long time. This library seems to go on forever. I am no longer certain that there is a way out. It feels as if I am somehow reliving the same experiences, day after day, endlessly. If I am to find an exit from this madness, I believe it will be through those obscene glowing books. There is unimaginable power in those pages, and unspeakable horror. It seems like the spirits of ancient deities lie dormant within the books, though I know not for what reason, but their collected power must be the key to my incarceration in this labyrinth. So, we are playing a character known as the Librarian. This is just the tutorial stuff. You don't need to bother with that. And she is trapped in this library. And here I am. I can actually do a lot of different things with it. I'm going to change my hair to a ponytail, because why not? I look like Laura Croft. So, I'm going to keep on going. This is just your hub world of the game. Now, there are a couple ways you can access. We have 3 books here. And these books are how we access the levels. Normally at the start of the game they're closed, but since I've played before, they're open. This is one of the add-on materials. This is the Asylum level, the add-on material. And this is the At the Mountains of Madness add-on, which I will be playing through as well. Legends tell of a catastrophic event thousands of years ago, when Earth fell to the wrath of the Old Ones. The few survivors discovered an ancient rite, which they used to seal away the dreadful beings in a labyrinth in prison. Life on Earth once again flourished, and the survivors formed a convent of guardians to protect the secret ritual of binding. So, there's lots of books in these libraries that just kind of detail the story of the game. There's not much story otherwise. That's the same book. And I'm going to try to get them in order. Thousands of years passed, and the Old Ones slumbered in their prison. In the late 19th century, archaeologists in Arabia unearthed the site where the binding ritual had been invoked. The disturbance rippled through the fabric of the cosmos and awoke the ancient beings. Forgotten horrors spilled forth, and Earth was once again in peril. In the early 20th century, when the Old Ones threatened Earth for the second time, the Guardians reconvened in New England to perform the ritual of binding once again. A modest library was chosen to host the rite, and the Guardians elected one among them, the Librarian, to remain at the prison and protect it from further disturbances. That's us! And I can't seem to find the 4th one on this floor, so I'm going to go to the 2nd floor. You might notice there's all these different fruit, and when I hover over it, it says eat. That is actually how we restore our health. You can see we are kind of not too well equipped to deal with the horrors of the mythos right now. Kind of really, really weak, so I'm trying to find the last book for you guys so you know the history. Here we go. At a small library in New England, the Guardians performed the ritual of binding to imprison the Old Ones. The Librarian, a singular guardian chosen to protect the site, was locked away with the terrible beings, but unbeknownst to the other Guardians, an errant word spoken during the ritual shattered the Librarian's mind. and memories. So, we are the Librarian. We are that chosen one that was destined to save Earth from the Great Old Ones. Sort of these giant, malevolent beings that want to destroy humanity. And, which... The pedestal has a shallow indentation engraved with a strange pattern. It looks like a spherical object could be placed here. So, our job, as a librarian, is to, go try and find the souls of these Great Old Ones and Outer Gods to put on these pedestals, which will open the way to this area, the outside of the main library, wherein we can hopefully stop this problem before it occurs. You might be wondering about this jack-o'-lantern as well. This jack-o'-lantern is, well, it literally goes to the trick-or-treat special level. It's nothing important. Everything else in here is pretty quiet, so I guess that's gonna do it for right now. That's the start of the game. As I'm sure you've all seen by now, Eldritch is a game drawing from the time-honored tradition of Lovecraftian horror. Lovecraftian horror, also sometimes called weird fiction, is a genre of speculative fiction with the basic underlying thread of human insignificance. Humans are simply not important in the grand scheme of the universe, or worse yet, we're a mistake of creation, and it's astonishing we've lived this long, really. The universe, according to Lovecraftian horror, is not as we understand it. There are things lurking out there in the dark abyss, things far more powerful than we could ever imagine, and we simply are little more than ants to them. In fact, these things are so dangerous to us that attempting to understand them drives us to madness. They're just so otherworldly and alien that we can't possibly begin to comprehend them. This cynical, paranoid view of reality and the fate of humanity, along with common tropes about monsters, aliens, science fiction, and a good dash of psychological and existential horror, all combine to create this roiling, disturbing, and tentacle-infested stew that is the Lovecraftian horror genre. Lovecraftian horror as a genre was named after American author Howard Phillips Lovecraft, who was born in Providence, Rhode Island on August 20th, 1890. Lovecraft lived a fairly sheltered life. He had a fairly privileged childhood and didn't take to traveling outside his hometown much until later in his life. His family had a sordid history of mental disorders, with his father first being institutionalized when Lovecraft was only 3, and his mother being diagnosed with a mental disorder due to medical complications much later in his life. Perhaps this history explains why, even from childhood, Lovecraft suffered from frequent night terrors in which he dreamt of horrid monsters and alien landscapes, both things that ended up becoming prominent features in his later works. Due to his rather introverted nature, Lovecraft was a voracious reader with an overactive imagination, even from a young age. You might even say Pretend was his favorite game to play. He was keenly interested in astronomy and the sciences, and scientific advancements of the time featured prominently in his later work, however, always with a tinge of wariness that science may be used for ill. He was horrified by things that came from the sea, finding them disgusting, another trait that later came back in his stories. As with all humans, however, Lovecraft was a flawed man. He was quite racist, anti-Semitic, and xenophobic, and remained so until towards the end of his life. This is yet another aspect that echoes in his stories, and is still a matter of strong controversy in the Cthulhu mythos fandom today. Despite Cthulhu being Lovecraft's most well-known creation, the man himself never referred to his world as the Cthulhu mythos. He and his circle of author friends generally refer to their collective universe as Yog-Sothothery, after Yog-Sothoth, another of Lovecraft's creations with a much more important role. Actually, of all of Lovecraft's creatures, Cthulhu is only ever mentioned prominently in a single story, The Call of Cthulhu. The most commonly referenced deities and creatures in Lovecraft's mythos are actually Nyarlathotep, Yog-Sothoth, and Shoggoths. Quite a leap in power from an outer god to a lowly mound of shambling flesh, isn't it? It wasn't until August Derleth in the 1950s came about and attempted to preserve Lovecraft's work that we got the term Cthulhu mythos. Derleth grew up reading Lovecraft's work from a young age and eventually came to write his own stories in it. Though many of his ideas and monsters were sound, some of his execution was quite flawed. For example, he introduced the idea of connecting the mythos deities to elements, and also brought in the idea of outer gods being evil creatures, constantly at war with good creatures called elder gods. Aside from being confusing as all get out, this idea fundamentally misses the mark of the mythos. Lovecraft's creations were always described as malign, but never as purposefully evil, simply because the concept of good and evil was so far beyond them. It is important, therefore, to remember that all of Lovecraft's monsters, dangerous and terrifying as they are simply operating on blue and orange morality. They have no actual concept of good and evil, because the idea is too primitive for them, and as such, none of them can even be described as evil. Yes, even Nyarlathotep, the Grandmaster Troll God of the universe and the closest thing to a Satan there is in the Cthulhu mythos, can't be considered evil, even though he's constantly attempting to get humanity to destroy themselves. Try wrapping your head around that one a few times. Regardless of Derleth's flawed execution of the mythos, it's him we have to thank for even knowing about Lovecraft's work to begin with. If it weren't for him and his publication company Arkham House, we'd never even have Lovecraft's work to read or draw inspiration from at all. And that would be a shame indeed, considering how much the Cthulhu mythos has inspired. Everything from web series to video games, tabletop RPGs, and films owes a huge thank you to Lovecraft and his work, as without him and the themes in his writings, we wouldn't have the huge variety of horror tropes in media that we have today. In a world with no Lovecraft, there would have been no Slender Man, no Alien, no Call of Cthulhu tabletop game, no Soul Eater, no Quaker Alone in the Dark, no Arkham Asylum the Batman comics, and no Eldritch. In fact, you probably know Lovecraft without even realizing it. For example, did you know that the remake of The Thing has a lot in common with At the Mountains of Madness? Or that there are two adaptations of Lovecraft stories in film, Reanimator and From Beyond? How about the recent video game Bloodborne? It borrows a ton of Lovecraftian elements in its enemies and monsters. Without Lovecraft, none of that would have happened. And that's a damn shame if you ask me. To this end, I've decided to give a little bit more information about the monsters and enemies in the game Eldritch. You'll be able to click on this little symbol right here, also known as the Elder sign, which is basically a protective symbol, and clicking on it will let you see more information about the game enemies, as well as give you some information about the Cthulhu mythos and its monsters. The tentacles of the mythos reach deep into our pop culture, wrapping everything in its slimy, squamous grasp, entrenching us in an overarching collective thrall. We have so much to owe to the Cthulhu mythos and its influence on the horror genre that we often don't recognize it until the themes crop up. Lovecraft's monsters, imported directly from his nightmares into our own, continue to fascinate us to this day. By allowing us to peek into the abyss beyond, we can learn to confront our own fears, a very powerful thing. So, raise a glass, viewers, or maybe even a tentacle or two, and cheer the Cthulhu mythos for its influence. Long may it live, and long may it influence our darkest of nightmares.